Hello everybody, my name is Jared and today we're going to be doing a video that's going to be a continuation for my How to Cosplay series that I've started and only have one part of so far. So finally there's going to be a part 2. This series goes from the absolute beginner all the way to a more advanced level. I have been cosplaying for about 10-11 years, and as I said in the previous video, I am not an expert by any means, and this is not a completely new concept, this series. It is just I wanted to add my own experience of having been a cosplayer for 10 years in the UK to the big old discussion of how to cosplay and how to start out if you are new, and how to progress your skills if you're kind of in that intermediate level. In case you haven't noticed, I'm incredibly handsy, so just get used to being distracted by my hands flying everywhere. I'm in a new apartment, we've just moved house. This is a temporary apartment until our actual built house is going to be finished. We're still waiting on that, but at the moment this is kind of where I'm going to be like set up temporarily. I am not using my lighting rig, it is quite bright out. Now in this second episode, we are going to be looking at planning your costume, so the actual planning process of your costume. Since the previous part, we actually picked what costume we're going to be doing. If you see me looking down at all, I have cue cards. So first of all, I want to sort of look into the actual research section, because I think that is one that you really need to do a lot of work in, and a lot of people kind of neglect that section when they're working on a cosplay for the first time. Now the first thing I do when I've chosen my costume and I'm all ready, I gather a lot of research. When I'm gathering visual references, I like to gather from loads of different sources, mainly because I always feel like you get a more rich costume if you look into little other elements that could go into the costume. Now I'll describe what I mean in a minute, but just bear in mind that every single costume is different. They're going to have different research materials, so this is going to sound like a really big list. But this is just meant to cover like the broad spectrum of all of the things that you could look at when you're gathering research images for your costume. Now these can be split up into these categories: promotional artwork, screenshots and HD frames, fan art and other cosplayers, similar costumes, and its original inspirations. Now I'll explain what I mean by all of these, because some of these I'm using kind of a broad way to describe them. Promotional artwork is official artwork like concept art, posters, cover art, and art from art books. All of this artwork is meant to be stuff that's going to be coming directly from the creator. It's all official, you know, all of it is accurate, and a lot of the time, because it's promotional art rather than the actual artwork itself, it can maybe be a little bit more embellished, it might be a little bit more detailed, and it's going to have maybe more detailing, colouring and things like that. This is particularly relevant when you're doing something like cosplaying from an anime. If you are cosplaying from an anime, the animated version is going to be the most streamlined, taken down version of the costume itself. And if you're wanting to do, say, a more realistic version of the costume, a lot of the time promotional artwork gives you things like seams where you know where a costume's going to go, and little details that maybe are left off in the anime. It's also very good if your series isn't animated, it's just something like a manga or a book. Any promotional artwork that comes with it will give you a detailed idea of what the costume is actually supposed to look like. And it's great for getting colour schemes. My original Kai costume, which is, I believe, pretty much canon, I didn't actually have the anime references for him yet, I only had the manga references, but promotional artwork and cover artwork was really helpful because it gave me a full colour version of him before he was actually animated. Screenshots and frames. These are from the actual media themselves, so you can gather these either by screenshotting your anime yourself, your series yourself, your whatever you're cosplaying from, video games, or you can do that by going onto the internet and seeing what people have already shared. I do recommend trying to get HD ones if you can, just because you really want to be able to see the details and things. I used this technique a lot for when I'm working on researching Fenris from Dragon Age. It's a much easier way of getting good references for the costume if you just play the game and turn the character, and you can see all of the details in the character as he's moving and things like that. Also relevant in this section is stuff like manga stills or game stills. These are usually put up either by people scanning the original mangas, in that sense, or by people playing the games and getting HD references, or even sometimes the actual creators will post images from their own game. It's a really good way to get really nice references, really HD quality ones, without having to just go in Google and type in references of Fenris from Dragon Age, or whatever you're cosplaying. Fan art or cosplay. A lot of people think this is a really taboo thing to use as reference, but if somebody's already done some of the work for you, why would you skip out on that? It is always really good to, if you're going to use them in something like a reference book, which I will get to when we talk about cosplay competitions, please ask the actual cosplayer or fan artist if you can use them in your book. I know you're not publishing it anywhere, but it's just polite, and I always find that it's going to leave a good relationship with other people in the cosplay community. I want to have mechanical wings for hawks, so I want them to be able to move, so this is something completely out of my comfort zone. So straight I went to YouTube to find other cosplayers who had made wings. It just really helps to have this concrete idea of how somebody could have made this if they've already made it. Because obviously you don't have to follow what everyone else is doing, but sometimes it does help to have a basic idea. But I will stress, at this point, never go exclusively from fan art or from cosplay. Nobody likes a copycat. Try not to be straight up just looking at somebody's cosplay and going, okay, how do I turn into them? Similar costumes. This one's a really good one for costumes, again, that are a little bit weirder. Fenris from Dragon Age has some really strange armour that was... I spent a long time trying to figure out what on earth was going on with that. But looking at other characters that are similar to him made it a lot easier to figure out what certain elements to his costume were actually meant to be. Other things can be stuff like looking at a similar, say, superhero costume. If there's a film version of a superhero you want to cosplay, and that film version has a similar outfit, and they've chosen to bring it to life in this sense, it's a lot easier to understand how it works. An excellent example is stuff like my Nightwing costume. I had to base loosely on quite a lot of already created hero costumes because there aren't a lot of already film real-life versions of Nightwing. So when it came to his costume, I was looking at it originally and just being like, this is just painted on him. You know what I mean? Because sometimes with comic books, it's not really very realistic. It's just sort of like, alright, this clings in all the places that something physically would not cling. But taking a look at how other costumes that are similar look, or other costumes that have similar details look, it can enrich your own cosplay. Another thing that can help in this situation is stuff like if you're doing a group cosplay, like my Love Live group that I did for a little while ago. I know, I cosplayed from Love Live. It looks weird looking at me now, but when we did the Love Live group, some references were harder at the time than others, and it was really helpful to look at how other characters had their costumes, because then you could look at how your matching outfits would go together. And its inspirations. Is this costume based on a specific era? Is this costume based on a specific genre? Well, look at the other things from that type. A really good example for that is my Prince Todoroki that I'm working on at the moment from the dubiously roleplay D&D ending of Boku no Hero. I'm working on that, and I'll be honest, it's quite a plain design actually. I wanted to make it really fancy and embellished. So what I did was I looked at other princely type characters and I used those as reference to embellish the costume. Also to enrich how I think certain elements of the costume go, because for a while I couldn't figure out if the jacket was meant to be like a waistcoat, if it was meant to be a coat itself and those sleeves were attached to it. The boots were a really interesting part of that, but when looking at how other costumes could go together in that kind of like LARPy D&D styling, I was able to come up with a more embellished design that I felt more comfortable in, that didn't necessarily stray too far away from his actual design. Another thing that's helpful with that is one of my friends is working on Edge Shot from Boku no Hero Academia, and that costume is very traditional, very Japanese, and we wanted to make sure we were being as respectful as possible when working on that costume. So we looked into Japanese ninja and the samurai look and tried to take a lot of inspiration from actual traditional techniques and things like that. So you can look at all of these kind of elements for making your design a little bit more enriched and a little bit more embellished. I'm going to say the word embellished a lot. Another thing that's really important to cover is to make sure that you're getting every angle humanly possible of your costume. That can be harder in certain different media, but if you can, try and get a front, a back, a side, a 3/4, and above, below, and any details of elements to the costume that aren't easy to see. By that I mean stuff like, does your character wear a jacket but is also wearing a shirt and you can't see the entirety of the pattern? Try and see if you can find any references at all, even if it's just original design work where you might have an idea of what the shirt actually looks like. A lot of people have this with stuff like Prompto from Final Fantasy, anything like that. So just make sure you can get as many details as possible, and close-ups. Close-ups are your best friend, especially if there's a lot of detail in your costume. Believe me, I have suffered through trying to figure out some costumes purely based on the fact that there is a detail that I cannot for the life of me figure out. I'm having actual flashbacks of a few of them right now. It's also helpful to get them in different lighting if you can. Stuff like in video games, some scenes can be really, really dark, especially if you're cosplaying from something like stuff like Dragon Age, where it's a little bit darker and moodier and there's a lot of intense lighting changes. You want to make sure you're getting the best reference for your colours possible, so try and get the costume in different lights so you can pick which colouring you want to go for. Now obviously not all of this is 100% necessary, you don't have to go into this level of detail, and as I said, if somebody else has done more of the research for you, ask if you can use their references, ask if they would mind explaining how they made a certain element of their costume. You're not bugging a cosplayer by asking them for a little bit of help, it's just when you don't do any of the work yourself that it starts to bother people. That applies to me too. If you see I've made a costume and you like how I made it, feel free to ask me questions. I am always here and I love helping people. I want to get more people into cosplay and I want everybody to have fun with cosplay together. Now I have all of my references. What are we going to do? We are going to deconstruct the costume. This is one of my favourite parts of cosplay. It's most people's least favourite part. Now when I say deconstruct, it means breaking down the costume into its most basic elements so that you can turn them into processes that you need to do, things that you need to buy, and techniques you need to learn. The elements that I usually break the costume down into go as such: hair, makeup, eyes, armour, tops, shoes, bottoms, accessories, and props. In makeup you can also apply prosthetics. This is the simplest way to get an idea of what you need to make, what you need to buy, and then further from that you can break things down into jobs, and that will all be kind of in our next video. So in our next video we will be learning about planning our costume from budget, fabrics, and time plans. Thank you so much for watching. Do let me know if there's anything I can help with, and if there's anything you want more detail on in this topic here. And please try not to jump ahead, there are going to be lots of videos in this series, and this is basically our most basic ones. I'm always here for questions if you need me, and as always, please remember to be creepy.